Hey y'all, it's Katie from the Extension Office with a few answers to frequently asked questions about pruning trees and shrubs. So first of all, do you have to prune? Yes and no, maybe. It depends on the health of the plant. If you're otherwise happy with the health and performance of your plant, you do not have to prune. Pruning is really to correct the plant sometimes or ensure best health. So what you can do is annually go through your landscape and look for plants, specifically trees and shrubs here, that are exhibiting some of these branch types. So, and remove them. You're looking for overlapping branches, branches that are awkward angles, sprouts, water sprouts, sprouts at the base. Anything broken needs to be removed. Anything that's really crowded can be thinned out. And if you can do that once a year, that's usually all the pruning you need. And this does not apply to fruit trees or herbaceous perennial type plants. This is specifically trees and shrubs. So the best time to prune can depend on a couple of things. First, it depends on you. Prune when it is most convenient for you. Don't wait for a certain time of year if it means you're not going to get to it, especially if it's a risk problem. Go ahead and handle it now. As far as plant health goes, if there was a best time of year to prune, it would be in January, February when the tree is dormant. So that's a good time to try to catch the tree, get your pruning done, because it's going to recover quickly with spring growth, but the wound that you're making isn't as big a deal because it's not a stressful time of year on the plant. As far as the age of the plant, usually we have to get our trees when they're younger, before about 5 to 7 years old. And then our shrubs, we can reach those most of their lives. So it's a little dependent. The flowers can make a little bit of a difference on when you might want to prune. If it's a spring blooming plant, like an azalea, you might want to prune that after it's through blooming, just so you don't lose the blooms for the season. So you can cut those plants after they finish blooming to make sure you don't remove the buds before the growth. All right, so you cannot control the height of your plant. The answer to this question is no. Plants are genetically dispositioned to get to a certain height. And so no matter how much cutting you do on it, you're not going to convince it to grow shorter. That's trees and shrubs. So what happens in situations like this is we've tried to reduce the height of the plant, but in 5 to 7 years, the plant's just going to grow right back to the height that it was. And so we've wasted a lot of time, input, and money that maybe we should have made the decision to remove the plant instead. Plants that are too big for the space that they're in, trees and shrubs, can definitely be removed. It's not a crime against nature to remove a plant and replace with a more appropriately sized plant. That said, prune the plant however you want. If you like to cut shapes into your plants, do that as pictured here. And so what I want you to know about that is when I talk about pruning in this presentation, it's for best plant health. It is not for aesthetic appearance or things like topiary or pollarding or espalier you might be familiar with. So those terms are kind of specialized pruning techniques. In this presentation, I'm talking about best health for your tree and your landscape. So there are two types of cuts that you usually make when you're pruning. One is to remove the branch, and the other is to reinvigorate or regenerate the branch. So when you're wanting to permanently remove a branch, you need to look for the collar. The collar is the pinch point at the base of a woody stem that it connects it to another branch or trunk. And you'll usually find that pinch point, and that's where you need to make a cut because the plant will seal itself off and no longer send energy down that branch. Had we stopped with the first cut in this picture, the branch would resprout out. I'm sure you've seen that before. When we cut at the collar, we kind of cut off the highway, cut off the off-ramp for energy to flow, and it continues to go up the trunk instead. So here's some images of right and not quite. The images on the left are correct pruning techniques. You can see the little red dashes there indicate where the collar is. And that's where you want to make that pruning cut. And when done correctly, it looks like the image below. On the right-hand side of the screen is the not quite. So with these images, the first one, the top one, the cut was made too close to the trunk in past the collar. And unfortunately, that damage is one, pretty serious, and two, can't be reversed. The tree is probably going to die as a result of that poor or incorrect pruning. And the image on the bottom, they didn't go quite far enough to find that collar. The pruning left a little stub, and what's going to happen there, like in the other picture, it will flush right back out and not achieve what we wanted it to. So that's why that makes a difference. However, when you're pruning shrubs, you're usually looking to rejuvenate those branches. And so when you do that, what you want to do is cut where you do want growth to come out. There are hidden buds along that stem waiting to be the first bud to sprout. And so when you make that cut, those buds will sprout out from that point and push out the new growth. So cut the shrubs where you want that new growth to come from. If you're not sure if what you're cutting is still alive or not, what you can do is a scratch test. And just take your fingernail and scratch on some thin bark on a branch. And if the plant is healthy, it's going to be bright green underneath, like you see in the picture here. Whoops, sorry about that. If your plant is not healthy or in decline, or if that branch is dead, you'll find that it's brown or yellowing or brittle underneath. So that's an easy way to kind of go through also and see, one, if your plant's worth cutting, and then what to kind of detail out. You want to take out anything that's dead or in decline. And along those lines, you are not going to kill a plant from pruning unless you just really did too much. It's not something you need to worry about. We can feel safe with pruning about 50% of a plant's leaves or crown away and it not damaging the plant. The exceptions are older plants. They do not respond as well to pruning as a younger plant does. And then very large plants, when they're taken back to a very low height, so like a 12-foot shrub taken back to 2 inches, yeah, that's probably not going to make it. So if you find your plant in decline, it was probably already in decline, like in this picture, and you can come through and prune out the dead, but the plant will continue to decline. So you do have to weigh your advantages and disadvantages to pruning, if it's worth it, or do you need to consider kind of more long-term planning for the plant? You do not need special tools. In other words, you don't need gadget tools, but you do need pruning tools. And so we're looking for pruning cross-action hand pruners or a pruning saw. Why those are important is they do the work for you. It shouldn't be too much strenuous effort for you to prune on most branches if you have the right tool. And we have to remember to use the right tool for the right job. I'm guilty of using hand pruners to prune out things that are too large really for what the hand pruner should be handling. But when I use a hand saw, it really does the work for me. So anyway, use the right tool, hire somebody if you can't do it, and understand that there's an industry certification known as certified arborist if you have questions. All right, we're wrapping up, believe it or not. So the last thing I want to touch on that's a frequently asked question for us here in North Carolina is how do I prune my crepe myrtle? All right, so first we're going to decide, are you pruning for plant health and performance, or are you pruning for aesthetics? So if you're pruning and considering something like a topiary form or a false form, you know, that is okay, but that's topiary or the Palardian that I mentioned. If we're pruning for plant health, all we really need to do is go through and look for those branches we talked about. The overlapping branches, the suckers, the crowded branches. And when we remove those, this is the result. So we got this right here on the left side of the screen with that pruning, and then not quite on the right-hand side. Now, if you have already, or if you see trees pruned like this, it's not a huge deal as far as the plant goes. It's probably going to regrow is what we see most of the time. However, the pruning work is just for aesthetics. This has not done anything for the health of the tree, and it can eventually harm the tree, but anyway, it's more for an appearance thing. All you have to do if you want to do something and you're unsure what, is that work that's on the left there. All right, if you have any questions, let us know.